Hi, I'm Patrick Ray, and I'm the director, editor, and producer of I Am Lisa, and you are watching Two Geeks Talking.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. I am joined today by the director of I Am Lisa, Patrick Ray.
Hi.
What is I Am Lisa, and how did you get approached about this?
Oh, it's a long story. Well, I would say I Am Lisa is best described as a female driven revenge film with some werewolf lore mixed in. Eric approached me. I directed a family film like a couple years ago, and I cast Eric's son Owen in the film. And so Eric was on set, and he was pitching me the idea for this movie. And I'm more of a horror guy. Obviously, I had gotten this family film through a chain of events, and while I was shooting it, obviously I was thinking about what would be my next project. So Eric was pitching the film to me, and he actually met me at a screening in Kansas City of some of my short films, and had mentioned it to me a couple years before that. So he was very persistent and in keeping me interested in the story. And then flash forward to 2018, late 2018, and we started doing some. I attended a table read, and I got more involved, and I was actually just going to be on as a producer. And then through some other chains of events, I became the director on the film, and we shot the film in July of 2019, and like the hottest month of the year in Missouri. And yeah, it was a blast, and I'm just really happy that it all kind of worked out.
Horror is your wheelhouse. What draws you to making amazing horror films that you have? Because I've seen a couple of your trailers for some of your work, and I must say there's some pretty intense stuff.
Man, I've always been attracted to the horror genre because I was a kid in the 80s, and I was told not to watch the horror genre. And it was one of those things where my parents were like, no, you shouldn't be watching that. And therefore I became more interested in watching it because of it. It was the forbidden fruit aspect of it, I think. The thing about horror is it lends itself to smaller budgets. You can pull off a pretty good horror movie for very little money. And obviously I Am Lisa was a micro budgeted feature. I mean, we shot the whole film in 14 days. And there's always a market for it. There's always an audience for it. And so I guess I've always just been drawn to the genre. I watch every horror movie I can get my hands on. And what I really liked about I Am Lisa is it kind of subverts the genre. It subverts the revenge film, and it also subverts the werewolf film and combines the two. And I thought that was interesting because I haven't seen that combination before, like where yes, it's a revenge movie, but it also has the werewolf aspect, and it's primarily a female cast. There are a few male actors in the film, but most of the villains are female, and the two protagonists are female. So I found that very interesting. And the werewolf genre is there's just not that many werewolf movies, and especially ones that do well. So I feel like there's like a ton of vampire films. There's a ton of slasher films. Yeah. But it's harder. For some reason, I felt like this was a new angle on the werewolf genre, and so the second Eric, pitched the idea to me, I was just like, okay, this is something cool, and this has potential. And over the course of 2018 into mid 2019, we worked on the script and found new ways to kind of subvert it, because I know that originally we had mostly male cast. Obviously, Lisa was still the protagonist, but a lot of the villains were male. And so we kept we're like, well, if we make the villains female, it's already going to make this movie a little bit more interesting to the audience and give it a little bit more market potential as well. So, yeah, I just think that's, you have to kind of subvert a little bit when you're making a horror movie, because so many things have been done to death. So it's always trying to find that new angle on something.
First day on set, what was the energy about the first scene once that was done?
For me, it was relief, because I hadn't worked with Kristen before. The rest of the cast I had worked with in the past on various other projects, but working on the first scene with Kristen, there was a sense of relief because you just never know. Like, luckily she was awesome. And she was like, she and I kind of had this psychic energy going where we would kind of read each other's minds on where we wanted the scene to go and the changes that we wanted to make and vice versa. And so there was a sense of relief because I knew right then after day one, this was going to go well. Because day one can usually tell you how things are going to go for the whole shoot. And I think it's important when you're creating a schedule as tight as this one was. If you're shooting a feature film in 14 days and you need to get a groove with your crew, it's important to not try to over schedule the first couple of days because you just want to be able to get the crew, to gelling with each other, and you want to be able to feel like you're gaining some momentum in production. If you start with some complicated effect shots on the first day, it can derail you, and it can work against creating that atmosphere of working together and such. So I think that it's important when you're scheduling a movie to find those first couple of days in there we did a lot of dialogue scenes those first couple of days in that house, even though we did have a moment where we were surrounded by police, but that wasn't our fault. Apparently there was a house that got robbed a couple houses down from where we were filming, and out of the blue, like, cops closed down the street and were like swarming the house that we were filming in, and immediately I was just like, oh my god, what do we do? And it turns out that some guy had robbed a house a couple houses down, and he had stolen like a bunch of really expensive Cuban cigars from the house next door and just dumped them in the backyard. And so, like, he jumped the fence, dumped the bag in the backyard where we were filming, and ran away. And so the cops showed up, and I was just like, man, you can't make this stuff up. You can plan and plan and plan for a film shoot, but it was completely out of our control. We planned out the shoot for a good couple months in advance, just making sure that we could get everything in the shot in the can in 14 days and planning out where the locations were. But those are the things in filmmaking where you're like, well, that's a curveball I didn't see coming. Mm-hmm. So I think if you have a good plan and a good strategy on how you're going to get the film shot, you can deal with problems like that without it completely derailing you.
The film itself, 14 days is a hell of a process. I mean, it is an intense process.
Yeah, no, it was. And the trick was, the key was, because this movie has a lot of locations. So usually when somebody tells you they're shooting a movie in 14 days, you're thinking, oh, it's got, 2 locations? And this had, God, Eric, how many locations does this movie have?
7, 8, 9, maybe.
Oh, more than that.
Yeah.
The trick was that we had to find locations that were relatively close to each other. So when they go see the movie in the film, that was relatively close to the bookstore where she works. And then her apartment was on the same block. So it was trying to find these locations where we didn't have to do, because what takes the most time is getting the crew from point A to point B. Yeah. Breaking down the gear, moving all the equipment, and getting the crew there. So it was tricky because we were basically trying to schedule this thing. It was like a Rubik's Cube of trying to get everything to line up just perfectly. And we're shooting in July, and that's one of the least comfortable months of the year in Missouri. It gets up to about 105 with the heat index. So there were a couple of days where the weatherman was saying, please don't go outside if you don't have to. And obviously those were the days where we had oh, my daughter wants to say hi. Say hi.
She's in the movie too.
Oh,
she is.
Perfect.
So she's just going to be jumping in the background.
That's fine.
By the way, the original movie Black Christmas is on my television in the background. I felt like that was appropriate.
Watch that
so, one of the things that I had shot a feature film, it was called Enclosure when we shot it, but then when they released it, it was called Arbor Demon. It has Fiona Dourif and Jake Busey and an actor named Kevin Ryan, who's been in a lot of things too. And we shot that movie in 12 days, and that was shot in South Carolina several years ago. And what I learned was that, obviously you have to be very judicial on how many shots you plan on getting in those days. So I had storyboards, I had shot lists, but I had planned that movie out a year in advance. So I had every shot of the movie was drawn out specifically. I didn't have that kind of time with I Am Lisa, so I ended up having to just create very detailed shot lists and give them to the crew on the day of, or email them the day before or whatever, and say this is what we're getting per day. And you start figuring out, okay, how much can we film in one day and still make the day a 12-hour day, you know? Because you don't want to go past 12 hours because then people the next day are too tired to work. So the trick is to get on set, shoot, and then be broken down and have all the gear packed up within a 12-hour period. So you're thinking always, how much can we get shot in that period of time and still make and still get most of the film, 90% of the film in the can in 14 days. You're always going to have to come back and shoot extra stuff that, you know, stuff that you didn't have time for. We ended up shooting the open of this film, which was set in a different, it worked because it was set in a different time period. It's supposed to have happened a couple months before the rest of the story. So we were able to come back in like November and shoot that scene. So I never had that on the schedule. So it technically was probably 15 days if you count that. But so you're always, because I'm also kind of handling the scheduling of the film. Me and the unit production manager, Tony Ontiveros, who was the unsung hero of the entire production, he and I worked for a good month in advance, just kind of putting together the schedule and making sure everything was going to get done on time. But there was a day where Kristen had to be in the woods, and it was going to be 105 degrees, and there was no way we could cancel the shoot. Like, they were basically saying, do not go outside. And it was one of those things where our backs were against the wall because we were like, okay, if we move this day, we lose the location for the next day because we'd be moving that, to, you know, so it became this domino effect. It's a house of cards. So we were like, we just have to power through and shoot. And so luckily, where we shot the wood scenes, there was a house that we could just kind of make our base, and all the crew members could hang out in there with the air conditioning until they were absolutely needed. So those are the things that people don't necessarily think about when they're watching a movie. They're just seeing the movie for what it is, but there's so much work and so much thought process that goes into the, you know, getting it all planned out. And, you know, from everything from weather to now we've got COVID, there's just so many elements now that have made things extra complicated. And so whenever it comes together and gets, I always commend anyone who makes a movie because it's a miracle that anything gets finished.
No, for sure. It's definitely something that takes a true team effort. And from what I'm hearing from you guys with I Am Lisa and the experiences everyone that went through this film, it sounds like it's an incredible. It was an incredible time, and a short amount of time to make it a truly epic feature film. So thank you for the trailer, and thank you for your hard work for that. I can't wait to see the feature film. When is the feature film coming out?
So in the United States, January 5th at Redbox kiosks across the U.S. And then Mutiny Pictures, our distribution firm, has signed a deal with, I think it's called Level Film, to release the film in Canada. And I don't have an exact date on that.
Oh, no worries.
But I will get that to you as soon as I find out. Yeah, you don't know, do you, Patrick? It's.
And then I think in March we've got more release, right? We've got like Amazon and DVD and
Fandango and iTunes and stuff, and then
Blu-ray.
Blu-ray is going to be apparently exclusive at Best Buy, which is cool.
Yeah.
And but then like the UK release, I think is supposed to be in April. And I don't know when the Canadian release is going to be, but we signed with Level Film, which is a cool company. I think they distributed the Peanut Butter Falcon last year and some other pretty well-known movies. So,
was there a scene that you directed and you were like, "This is great. This is what I envisioned. This is what being a director has brought me to this goal"?
There were a couple scenes with an actress named Manon Halliburton who plays one of the main villains. She is the main villain in the film, and there was some scenes where she has to deliver a lot of dialogue, but she did it with such eloquence. She just plays a really good villain, and I've always been. I don't know what this says about me as a person, but I've always liked the bad guys in movies better than the heroes, and I don't know why that is. I often point to like movies like RoboCop or even Star Wars. I was way more interested in the villains than I was the heroes. And so it's like one of those things where just seeing all those villains come to life was a lot of fun. But one thing I really liked about this project, and I'm always very thankful for, is I got to shoot it mostly 15 minutes from my house. I mean, it's great. Like I can get up and I don't have to drive 2 hours to a location. I didn't have to fly. Like the one I did before was shot in South Carolina. So I got to sleep in my own bed and get up and shoot. There's a scene that's set at like a body shop, which was a lot of fun to shoot. And the body shop was literally like 2 minutes from my house. So it was like awesome. And I think Peter Jackson said the same thing about making the Lord of the Rings movies, because he got to shoot those movies and they were basically 15 minutes from his house where he went to film in New Zealand. So I was just very thankful that I got to do what I really enjoy and not have to be in Los Angeles or Georgia or Austin. I could just do it 15, 20 minutes from my house, and I keep somehow managing to keep getting projects that are relatively close or in Kansas City. So I'm very thankful for that.
One or two people that inspired you on your path to where you are today?
I too was a child of the 80s, and so I would have to, it's tricky because I always go back and forth between John Carpenter, Steven Spielberg, or Wes Craven, but I have to probably say Wes Craven has been more of an inspiration for me, just because you hear a lot about the way he treated people, and I think that's important. On set, he was known to be very kind, even though he was making these very disgusting horror movies, and never treated people with disrespect, and yet still got the job done and made some classic movies. I was lucky enough I got to meet him twice before he passed away, and he was very nice. It was funny though, because when he got introduced to me at one point, and he goes, "Wow, you're my competition." That's what he said to me. I was like, it was funny, but
you started bowing to him at that point.
I know,
right?
I was. I was like, yeah, I would definitely say like I appreciate him because of the way he treated, and you read about it, the way he treated his cast and his crew with respect, and yet still got the job done. And I feel like that is the sign of a true, really good director, is being able to get the work made and do it in a way that is respectful and and still make his mark. And so I think that's probably, I would probably lean towards Wes Craven more now than John Carpenter, even though John Carpenter movies are always on my television.
Do you consider yourself personally successful?
I have to follow them up. They said everything I was going to say. I think sometimes you have to sit back and think, people are going to remember you most of all by how you treated people. And I think that as long as I feel like I've treated people with respect and kindness and love and appreciation, that people respect and feel like I've been a kind person to them, I feel like I've become successful personally. Again, I'm thankful for my friends and my family. And it is hard sometimes to not compare yourself to other people. But at some point you have to say, look, other people are probably really wanting what you've achieved as well. So it's like you have to kind of sit back and really take it all in and say, okay, I've done pretty well for myself. I'm 40 and I'm still making movies, and I've gotten to do what I dreamed about, what I was daydreaming about doing when I was in high school, which is cool, I think, and a lot of that is because of the support of my friends and family. Like my parents, God bless their hearts, they have never deterred me from making movies. They have never ever swayed me from my dream. And in fact, my mom used to say she would have a nightmare where I woke up and decided I wanted to be a doctor instead. So that's the kind of thing I'm very thankful for, is that I have a family and friends that support me and believe in me. And I think a lot of that is just having been raised properly by them. And so whenever I work with people, I try to treat them with respect and love, because ultimately when you're gone, that's what people are going to remember, is how you treated them.
The reverse of success is failure. How do you deal with your failures?
It's funny because like over the years, failures have become actually more, I've been weirdly more embracing them. your first couple of years making movies, you're just like, you get rejected by one film festival and you're like, that's it, I'm done. I'm out. Apparently nobody likes me, or you start seeing like, the thing about making a movie is you put it out into the ether, and all of a sudden a bunch of people you don't know decide they're just going to write about it and tell you how crappy of a human you are and how terrible of a director you are. At some point, your skin gets really thick, and it has to. Otherwise, you're going to cry yourself to sleep every night. I remember Kevin Wilmot was my film professor at the University of Kansas, and he's gone on to write. He ended up winning the Oscar for Black Klansman, and I think he's going to be up for The Five Bloods, the Spike Lee movie this year. And he gave me a piece of advice when I graduated. He says, have a good sense of humor about everything. Otherwise, it's going to eat you alive. And I'm like, that is one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. Because ultimately, you're not a brain surgeon. You're not a nuclear physicist. You're just making entertainment. And so you have to kind of sit back and say, okay, if somebody doesn't like it, and if it fails, move on to the next thing. Have a good sense of humor about it. Because ultimately, you're just, and I know this sounds bad, but you're just making a movie. And so I'm way more critical of my failures in my personal life, like adulting. I'm terrible at adulting, but I think I'm okay at making movies. So I would say that, I just have a good sense of humor, and that's the best way to deal with failure.
Then to you here, Patrick, of course, as a director for many years, you created a lot of wonderful works, and people are obviously looking at your work, rejections aside from film festivals that don't like us when we do short films, etc. Don't get me started on that. But how can they inspire the generation that follows them if they decide to become a director or anything along that line?
I always tell people, I occasionally get to talk to some film students at KU or at other events, and I always tell people, like, right now, we're at this kind of interesting time where the technology to make a movie is readily available. It's easier to get your hands on the equipment. It's harder to stick out. I think it's because so many people have got cameras now, they're shooting stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that just kind of, I would say they cancel each other out, but there's just a lot of stuff that doesn't have its own unique voice. So I always tell upcoming filmmakers, I said, find your voice. First of all, find people you enjoy working with. I think that is the key. And it's tough because you got to go through a couple, some conflict sometimes to find those people. And find your unique voice. Find a story that you think sticks out, and that way you stand out from the glut of work that gets dropped on the internet every day. And so I think that it's important to come at things from a unique perspective, and find and also watch a lot of movies. I know some people who I'll talk to them about different movies, and they're not really sure what I'm talking about. So I'm always like, you have to watch a lot of movies because you need to know what has come before you. Has something been done before? It's important because otherwise your film will always get compared to something else that's been made before. So I think that it's important to have a wide knowledge of everything that from the history of cinema. I know that it's hard sometimes for the younger generation to watch older films maybe sometimes, but I think you just have to go out there, and everything's readily available for the most part. I know there's a lot of like older films that kind of gotten lost over the course of over the years because they weren't properly stored or whatever, never got released digitally. But definitely seek out as many classic films as possible and watch them and learn from them, so that you can start developing your own voice. And obviously your own voice comes from your own personal experiences. But I always tell people, here's the thing, the equipment is there. What you have to bring to the table is a unique story, and obviously good acting. And I always tell people, you got to find good sound. I think that sometimes sound gets lost in the shuffle, and it's one of them. I think movies are 75% sound. And so if you watch a movie like Paranormal Activity, I always tell people the movie can look terrible, but if the sound is great, you'll still be able to hold people's attention. So I always say definitely focus on getting a good somebody good to work on sound.
Yeah, you can always save bad video. You can't save bad sound.
Right. You can watch the most beautifully shot movie, and if the audio is terrible, you're not going to be able to connect with it.
Exactly. Connection is always a good thing to have. I hate to say it, But that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. But before I let each one of you go, please take the time to promote yourself on social media or where else we can find you on the wide world of the internet.
You can find me on Facebook. I have 2 Facebook pages. I have just my regular Patrick M. Ray Facebook page, and then I have a Patrick Ray writer, director, producer page. And then I'm on Instagram as well. I am not on Twitter. I'm just not. So I'm on Instagram or Facebook. So.
Like I said, that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. You, of course, find this interview and the thousands of others that I've done over the past 12 years on tgtmedia.com or twogeekstalking.com. Of course, we are on YouTube, youtube.com/c/tgtmedia. And of course, Two Geeks Talking is the word 2, not the number 2. If you use the number 2, you really haven't been following me for 12 years now, have you? Shame on you. That being said, you can find me on social media at Kurt Sasso on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. But that ends this episode, and this will be the very first episode of January 2021 because the film is going to be released on Redbox January 5th, I believe you said. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Beautiful. All right. Thanks, everyone, listening and watching. Tune in next week for another great interview on Two Geeks Talking, where everyone has a story to tell, and it's up to me to help bring that out. Thank you. Hey, all, Kurt Sasso here from Two Geeks Talking. If you like this video and these quick clips here, make sure you take a look at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TGTmedia. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe as well. Hit the bell to make sure you get notifications, of course, from videos like this here. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching over the years, and keep listening and watching for new and exciting interviews with talented and creative people in the entertainment industry. I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. Thank you so much.